The wagon wheel cracked against the boulder with such force that Maverick Holloway heard it from his porch 3 miles away. He'd been counting the minutes until 4 o'clock, when Jeremiah's mail wagon was due to arrive with his bride-to-be. Instead, he heard cursing that would make a saloon keeper blush, followed by the unmistakable sound of someone wrestling a stubborn mule. Maverick grabbed his rifle and spurred his horse toward the commotion. What he found at Devil's Bend made him question whether the desert sun had finally addled his brain. A woman the size of a grizzly bear was single-handedly lifting the broken wagon while simultaneously keeping 3 ornery mules in line with nothing but her voice and what appeared to be supernatural strength. "You mangy, flea-bitten sons of perdition," she bellowed at the mules, hefting the wagon's back end as if it were made of kindling. "Stand still or I'll turn you into jerky." The mules, surprisingly, obeyed. Maverick had expected petite little Cordelia Fairweather from her letters, delicate hands, tiny waist, voice like a songbird. The woman before him stood nearly 6.5 feet tall, with shoulders that could carry a plow horse and hands that looked capable of wrestling mountain lions. Her auburn hair had escaped its pins during the struggle, creating a wild mane that caught fire in the afternoon sun. "Ma'am," Maverick called out, sliding from his saddle, "you appear to be in some difficulty." She whirled around, and Maverick felt his breath catch. Despite her imposing size, her face held a beauty that struck him like lightning, fierce green eyes, high cheekbones, and lips that suggested both tenderness and trouble. But those eyes were currently shooting daggers at him. Difficulty. She snorted, dropping the wagon with a thud that shook the ground. "Mister, I've got a busted wheel, 3 mules with the IQ of tumbleweeds, a driver who ran off at the first sign of trouble, and I'm supposed to be meeting my intended husband in." She pulled out a battered pocket watch. 15 minutes. "So yes, you could say I'm in some difficulty." Maverick's throat went dry. "You wouldn't happen to be Miss Cordelia Fairweather, would you?" Her expression shifted from irritation to something resembling panic. "Oh, sweet, merciful heavens. You're him, aren't you, Maverick Holloway?" He nodded, removing his hat. "Pleased to make your acquaintance, Miss Fairweather." For a moment, they stared at each other across the dusty trail. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of sagebrush and the promise of rain. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. Cordelia's shoulders sagged. "I suppose this is where you tell me there's been a terrible mistake and ride off into the sunset." "Well," Maverick said slowly, studying her face, "I was expecting someone different, I'll grant you that. But I'm a man of my word, Miss Fairweather." "Question is, are you?" Her chin lifted defiantly. "Came all the way from Missouri, didn't I?" "That you did? Now, let's get this wagon fixed and get you home. We've got a wedding to discuss." The next morning brought chaos to Maverick's modest ranch house. Cordelia had spent the night in his spare room, and he'd quickly learned that everything about her was larger than life, including her morning routine. She'd managed to drain his water barrel, consume enough breakfast for 3 ranch hands, and accidentally demolish his favorite chair just by sitting in it. "I'm sorry about the chair," she said for the 5th time, wringing her hands as she surveyed the splintered remains. "Back home, PA always said I didn't know my own strength." Maverick swept up the debris, trying not to smile. "It was getting rickety anyway. Besides, I've been meaning to build some sturdier furniture." The truth was, watching Cordelia navigate his small house was like watching a magnificent wild Mustang trying to fit into a chicken coop. She ducked under doorways, turned sideways, through narrow passages, and handled his delicate china with the careful concentration of someone diffusing dynamite. "Maverick," she said suddenly, her voice unusually quiet, "we need to talk about this marriage business." He set down his broom and faced her. In the morning light streaming through his windows, she looked even more imposing and even more beautiful. Her calico dress, clearly homemade, and practical rather than fashionable. Couldn't hide the graceful way she moved despite her size. "I'm listening. I wasn't entirely truthful in my letters," she began, pacing to the window. "I mean, I didn't lie outright, but I omitted certain details, such as—" She gestured helplessly at herself. "This, for starters. I'm not exactly the dainty flower you were expecting. Back in Missouri, they called me the fair-weather giant. No man would court me because they said I'd break them in half just trying." "To dance?" Maverick crossed his arms. "And what did you tell them?" "That they were probably right," she said with a bitter laugh. "I've always been this way. Too big, too strong, too much of everything. My ma used to say, God must have been feeling ambitious the day he made me." "Your mother sounds like a wise woman." Cordelia spun around, eyes wide with surprise. "Wise for calling me a freak of nature." "For recognizing that God doesn't make mistakes," Maverick said simply. "He makes people exactly as they need to be, for the life he's planning for them." She stared at him, and he could see tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. "You don't understand. I can lift a full-grown steer, split firewood faster than most men. And I once accidentally broke a man's wrist just shaking his hand. What kind of wife does that make me?" Maverick moved closer, his boots clicking on the wooden floor. "A kind who can help run a ranch in country that eats weak people alive. The kind who won't break under pressure when things get tough. The kind who—" He paused, studying her face, "who might be exactly what I've been praying for without knowing it." "You're just being kind?" "I'm being honest. Cordelia, I've been alone on this ranch for 5 years. I've fought off cattle rustlers, survived drought and floods, and buried more dreams than I care to count. I don't need a delicate flower who'll wilt at the first sign of trouble. I need a partner." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "And you think that could be me?" "I think," Maverick said carefully, "that we should give it a chance. What do you say we spend the next few weeks getting to know each other? No pressure, no promises we can't keep. Just see what happens." For the first time since she'd arrived, Cordelia smiled, really smiled. It transformed her entire face, making her look younger and softer despite her formidable size. "I'd like that," she said. "I'd like that very much." 3 weeks later, Maverick realized he was falling in love with a woman who could probably press his horse. The revelation hit him while watching Cordelia repair his barn roof, a job that would have taken him and 2 hired hands a full day, but which she accomplished in 4 hours while humming gospel hymns. "Hand me them nails, would you?" she called down from the peak of the roof, balanced on the narrow beam with the casual ease of a tightrope walker. Maverick tossed up the box, which she caught one-handed without even looking. 3 weeks of watching. Her work had taught him that Cordelia's strength wasn't just physical. She approached every task with methodical intelligence and unwavering determination. She'd reorganized his entire cattle operation, identified weak spots in his fencing that he'd missed for years, and somehow convinced his ornery bull, Tornado, to eat from her hand. "You're staring again?" she called down, and he could hear the smile in her voice. "Just admiring the craftsmanship," he replied, though they both knew he was admiring more than her roofing skills. The past weeks had revealed layers to Cordelia that her letters had only hinted at. She read voraciously, devouring every book in his modest library and engaging him in discussions about everything from politics to poetry. She cooked with the same passion she brought to physical labor, turning his simple ingredients into meals. That made him wonder how he'd survived on his own cooking for so long. And in the evenings, when they sat on the porch watching the sunset, she spoke of dreams and fears with an honesty that took his breath away. "There," she said, hammering in the final nail. "That roof will hold through anything short of a tornado." She climbed down with surprising grace, wiping sweat from her brow with her sleeve. The physical work had brought color to her cheeks and loosened her hair from its careful braid. Maverick found himself thinking, not for the first time, that she was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. "Cordelia," he said suddenly, "will you marry me?" She froze, hammer still in her hand. "What?" "I know we said no pressure, but I can't pretend anymore. These past 3 weeks have been the best of my life. I don't care what anyone in town thinks about us. I don't care that you're twice my size or strong enough to arm wrestle a grizzly. I care that you make me laugh, that you challenge my thinking, and that you've turned this house into a home just by being in it." Cordelia set down the hammer carefully. "Maverick, there's something else I need to tell you. Something I didn't mention in my letters." His heart sank. "What is it?" "I can't have children," she said quietly. "The doctor in Missouri told me years ago something about my size, my constitution. He said women built like me ... were not meant for motherhood." The pain in her voice nearly broke his heart. "Cordelia, I know you probably want sons to carry on your name, to help with the ranch. I understand if that changes things." Maverick stepped closer, close enough to see the tears she was trying so hard to hold back. "You want to know what I want? I want a wife who'll stand beside me when times get tough. I want someone who'll argue with me when I'm being stubborn and support me when I'm right. I want to wake up every morning knowing that whatever the day brings, I'm not facing it alone. And children. There are plenty of orphan children in this territory who need homes," he said gently. "Maybe our family will come to us a different way. Or maybe it'll just be us, and that'll be more than enough." She searched his face, looking for doubt or disappointment. Instead, she found only truth. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, what?" "Yes, I'll marry you, you stubborn, wonderful man." He swept her into his arms, or tried to. She was so solid, so grounded, that his feet left the earth instead. They both laughed as she steadied him, her hands gentle on his shoulders. "I think," she said with a grin, "we're going to have to work on the traditional romantic gestures." The wedding preparations brought the first real test of their partnership. News of the upcoming nuptials spread through the small town of Cedar Junction like wildfire, and the reactions ranged from curious to cruel. Maverick found himself on the receiving end of snickers at the general store and thinly veiled jokes about whether he'd need a stepladder to kiss his bride. Cordelia bore the brunt of the gossip with stoic dignity. But Maverick could see it wearing on her. She'd grown quieter during their evening talks, and he'd caught her staring at her reflection in the window with an expression of profound sadness. The breaking point came on a Saturday afternoon when they went to town together for supplies. As they walked down Main Street, Cordelia's hand resting lightly on his arm, Maverick noticed the way people stopped their conversations to stare. Some were merely curious, but others wore expressions of barely concealed ridicule. "Look at that." Poor little man, he heard Mrs. Pemberton whisper to her companion. She snapped him like a twig on their wedding night. Cordelia's grip tightened on his arm, and he could feel her starting to withdraw into herself. But before he could say anything, trouble arrived in the form of Buck Morrison and his 2 brothers, 3 men who'd been causing problems in town for months. Well, Buck called out, loud enough for half the street to hear. "If it isn't the circus freak and her trained poodle." Maverick felt Cordelia stiffen beside him. "Keep walking," she murmured. But Buck wasn't finished. He stepped directly into their path, his brothers flanking him. "I heard you 2 are getting married. That's going to be some spectacle. Hope you got yourself a sturdy bed, Holloway, or you'll be sleeping on the floor." "That's enough," Maverick said quietly, his hand moving toward his gun. Buck laughed. "What are you going to do, little man?" "Hide behind your giant girlfriend." Before Maverick could respond, Cordelia stepped forward. In one fluid motion, she grabbed Buck by the front of his shirt and lifted him clean off the ground until they were eye to eye. "Listen carefully," she said, her voice deadly calm. "I've been patient with the whispers and the stares because this is your town and I'm new here. But if you ever, and I mean ever, disrespect my husband to-be again, you'll discover just how much damage these hands can do." Buck's feet kicked uselessly in the air. His brothers started forward, but stopped when Cordelia turned her gaze on them. Whatever they saw in her eyes made them take a step back. As she continued, "You're going to apologize to Maverick. And then you're going to spread the word that the next person who has something unkind to say about our marriage can take it up with me personally. Are we clear?" Buck nodded frantically. Cordelia set him down gently, brushing off his shirt with mock concern. I apologize," Buck stammered, not quite meeting Maverick's eyes. "Accepted," Maverick replied calmly. The Morrison brothers scurried away, and gradually the crowd that had gathered began to disperse. But Maverick noticed that the expressions had changed. Where there had been ridicule, there was now something closer to respect, and perhaps a healthy dose of wariness. "That," he said as they continued down the street, "was magnificent." Cordelia flushed. "I probably shouldn't have done that. Now everyone will think I'm some kind of violent brute." "No," Maverick said firmly. "Now everyone will know that you're a woman who protects what's hers. There's a difference." That evening, as they sat on their porch watching the stars emerge, Cordelia was quiet for a long time. "Penny for your thoughts," Maverick said. "I keep waiting for you to change your mind," she admitted. "So realize that marrying me means a lifetime of scenes like today." Maverick reached for her hand, marveling as always at how his fingers disappeared in her grasp. "Cordelia, every marriage faces challenges. Some couples fight about money or children or whose turn it is to milk the cows. We might have to deal with small-minded people occasionally. I'll take our problems over theirs any day." She squeezed his hand gently. "You really mean that?" "I really do. Besides," he added with a grin, "I rather enjoyed watching Buck Morrison's feet dangle in the air." Her laughter rang out across the prairie, full of joy and freedom. "You're a wicked man, Maverick Holloway. Only when it comes to protecting my future wife." Their wedding day dawned clear and bright, with just enough breeze to keep the September heat bearable. Cordelia stood before the mirror in the church's small preparation room, adjusting her dress for the 100th time. The white silk had been her grandmother's, altered by the local seamstress to fit Cordelia's unique proportions. The result was surprisingly elegant, emphasizing her statuesque beauty rather than trying to minimize her size. "You look radiant, dear," said Mrs. Patterson, the minister's wife, as she helped arrange Cordelia's veil. "Simply radiant." Through the window, Cordelia could see the guests gathering in the churchyard. To her surprise, the attendance was larger than she'd expected. News of their unusual romance had spread beyond Cedar Junction, drawing curious onlookers from neighboring towns. But mixed among the strangers were familiar faces, townspeople who had come to know and respect her during her month-long stay. Old Henrik the blacksmith caught her eye and tipped his hat. She'd helped him move a new anvil into his shop when his back gave out, and since then he'd become one of her staunchest defenders. Martha Chen from the boarding house waved from beneath her parasol. Cordelia had assisted her in wrestling a escaped pig back into its pen, and they'd been friends ever since. "Are you ready?" Mrs. Patterson asked gently. Cordelia nodded, though her stomach was performing acrobatics. "As ready as I'll ever be." The church doors opened, and she stepped into the sanctuary. The guests rose as one, and she heard the collective intake of breath that always accompanied her first appearance. But this time, instead of stares of ridicule, she saw faces filled with genuine curiosity and, in many cases, admiration at the altar. Maverick waited in his best suit, his face glowing with such obvious happiness that several ladies in the congregation sighed romantically. When his eyes met hers, his smile widened until she thought her heart might burst from joy. She walked down the aisle with measured steps, acutely aware of her size in the small church, but determined to carry herself with dignity. As she drew closer to Maverick, she noticed he had to tilt his head back slightly to meet her eyes, and she felt the familiar pang of self-consciousness. But when she reached the altar and he took her hands in his, all her worries melted away. Whatever their differences in size, they fit together perfectly in the ways that mattered. "Dearly beloved," began Reverend Morrison Buck's uncle, who had agreed to perform the ceremony with obvious reluctance, "we are gathered here today to witness the union of Maverick Holloway and Cordelia Fairweather in holy matrimony." The ceremony proceeded smoothly until they reached the ring exchange. Maverick had ordered Cordelia's ring specially made to fit her large fingers. But when she tried to slip his wedding band onto his hand, her nervous fingers fumbled and dropped it. The golden circle bounced once and rolled under the front pew. A collective gasp arose from the congregation. Dropping the ring was considered terribly unlucky. Cordelia's face flamed with embarrassment as she knelt to retrieve it, her voluminous skirts making the task difficult. "Allow me," came a small voice from the front row. Little Timothy Patterson, the minister's 6-year-old son, scrambled under the pew and emerged triumphantly with the ring. He presented it to Cordelia with a gap-toothed grin. "Here you go, Mrs. Giant Lady," Pa says. "Dropping rings means you'll have lots of adventures together." The congregation laughed, and the tension broke. Cordelia accepted the ring with solemn gratitude, then successfully slipped it onto Maverick's finger. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Morrison concluded with visible relief. "You may kiss the bride." This was the moment Cordelia had been dreading. How could Maverick kiss her without looking ridiculous? The height difference was simply too great for any traditional romantic gesture. But Maverick had planned ahead. He stepped onto a small wooden box he'd positioned behind the altar earlier, bringing him to just the right height. As he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers, Cordelia felt tears of joy slide down her cheeks. The kiss was everything she'd dreamed it would be: tender, passionate, and full of promise for their future together. "Ladies and gentlemen," Reverend Morrison announced, "I present to you Mr. and Mrs. Maverick Holloway." The congregation erupted in applause and cheers, and Cordelia realized with wonder that the sounds were genuinely celebratory. Whatever doubts the townspeople had harbored about their unusual match seemed to have been swept away by the obvious love between the newlyweds as they walked back down the aisle together. Maverick's hand firmly in hers, Cordelia felt truly happy. For the first time in her adult life, their honeymoon was spent not in some distant romantic locale, but in the familiar comfort of Maverick's ranch. Now, their ranch. They had work to do before winter set in, and both agreed that building their life together was more important than any fancy trip. The first few weeks of marriage brought adjustments that would have defeated a less determined couple. Cordelia accidentally destroyed their bedroom door on the second night, forgetting to duck and walking straight through the frame. Maverick woke to find her standing in the hallway surrounded by splintered wood, looking mortified. "I'll rebuild it," she said miserably. Stronger this time, instead of anger, Maverick burst out laughing. "Maybe we should just remove all the doors and raise the ceilings while we're at it." They spent the next 3 days renovating the house to better accommodate Cordelia's size. Maverick watched in amazement as his wife single-handedly lifted roof beams and repositioned support posts that would have required a crew of men and elaborate pulley systems. Her strength continued to astonish him, but it was her gentle precision that truly impressed him. Despite her immense power, she could handle the most delicate tasks with surprising finesse. "Where did you learn carpentry?" he asked one afternoon, as she expertly fitted a new door frame. "My PA was a furniture maker back in Missouri," she replied, checking her measurements. "Said I had good hands for the work, even if I was too big for most everything else." The renovations attracted visitors from town, drawn by curiosity about how the odd couple was managing domestic life. What they found surprised them. Instead of the disaster many had predicted, they discovered a smoothly functioning partnership. Cordelia handled the heavy labor and repairs while Maverick managed the books and handled the more delicate aspects of ranching. Together, they were accomplishing more than either could have alone. Old Henrik arrived one morning with his nephew in tow, claiming they were just passing by. In reality, he'd come to see if the rumors about Cordelia's strength were true. He watched, slack-jawed, as she lifted his fully loaded wagon, horse and all, to help him retrieve a tool that had fallen underneath. "Sweet, merciful heavens," he breathed. "How much can you lift, Mrs. Holloway?" Cordelia shrugged modestly. "Never really tested my limits. Why would I need to?" But word of her feat spread quickly, and soon they had a steady stream of visitors with various challenges. Could she move old Peterson's stuck boulder? Could she help the widow Martinez repair her collapsed well? Could she assist with the barn raising at the Connor place? Each time, Cordelia approached the task with careful consideration and methodical planning. She never showed off or made a spectacle of her abilities, treating her strength as simply another tool to help her neighbors. Her humble attitude and genuine desire to be useful gradually won over even the most skeptical townspeople. One evening, in late October, as they sat by the fireplace Cordelia had built with stones she'd gathered from the canyon, Maverick realized their house had become a gathering place for the community. 3 different neighbors had stopped by that day seeking advice or assistance, and all had been invited to stay for dinner. "Do you mind?" Cordelia asked, following his gaze to the kitchen where Martha Chen was helping her prepare tomorrow's bread. "Having all these people around so much? Mind. Cordelia, you've made our home the heart of this community. 6 months ago, half these people barely spoke to each other. Now look at them." In the parlor, Henrik was teaching young Timothy Patterson how to whittle while widow Martinez shared gossip with Mrs. Patterson. It was a scene of comfortable domesticity that filled Maverick with contentment. "I love you, you know," he said quietly. Cordelia's face softened. "Even though I'm too big for most doorways and strong enough to arm or sell your cattle." "Especially because of that," he replied. "You're exactly who I needed, Cordelia. You're exactly who this place needed." She leaned down and kissed the top of his head. "Then I guess it's a good thing that mail wagon broke down when it did." "The best thing," Maverick agreed, pulling her down beside him on the couch they'd reinforced together. "The very best thing." Spring brought unexpected challenges that tested their marriage in ways neither had anticipated. A harsh winter had decimated the local cattle population, and many ranchers were facing bankruptcy. Maverick and Cordelia had fared better than most, thanks largely to her innovations in shelter design and her ability to clear blocked trails. That would have been impassable to others. But their neighbors were struggling, and Cordelia's soft heart couldn't bear to see families in need. "We should help them," she said one morning, watching from their porch as the Johnson family loaded their belongings into a wagon. They were the 3rd family this month to abandon their homestead. "We're already doing what we can," Maverick replied. "We've shared our hay, lent tools, offered work to anyone who needed it. It's not enough." Cordelia's jaw set in the determined expression he'd learned to recognize. "I have an idea, but you're not going to like it." She was right. He didn't like it. Cordelia proposed to hire herself out to neighboring towns as a laborer, using her extraordinary strength to earn money that could help their struggling neighbors. It would mean weeks apart, traveling from job to job, taking on tasks no ordinary person could handle. "Absolutely not," Maverick said firmly. "I won't have my wife traveling alone, working like a common laborer. Maverick, I can earn more in a month than most men make in a year. We could save half the homesteads in the county." They argued for days, their first real marital conflict. Maverick worried about her safety, her reputation, and the precedent they'd be setting. Cordelia accused him of trying to cage her, of being ashamed of her abilities. The fight came to a head one evening when she announced she'd already accepted a job in Millerville, 50 miles north. "You did what?" Maverick's voice was dangerously quiet. "They need someone to move building stones for the new church. It's a 3-week job that pays more than we make in 6 months of ranching. And you made this decision without consulting me? I'm consulting you now. No, you're informing me. There's a difference." They stood facing each other in their kitchen, both stubborn, both convinced they were right. Finally, Cordelia spoke. "When I married you, I didn't stop being who I am. My strength is part of me, Maverick. Would you ask a musician to stop playing music? Would you ask a teacher to stop teaching? This is different." "How?" "Because I'm a woman. Because wives are supposed to stay home and tend house. Because I love you," he said quietly. "Because I can't bear the thought of something happening to you when I'm not there to protect you." Her expression softened. "Oh, Maverick, don't you see? I don't need you to protect me. I need you to trust me." They reached a compromise. Maverick would accompany her on the job, handling the business negotiations and planning while she provided the labor. It wasn't ideal for either of them, but it was workable. The Millerville job was a revelation. Word of Cordelia's abilities had spread, and soon they had more offers than they could handle. She moved mountains, literally. In some cases, while Maverick managed their growing enterprise with shrewd business sense, by autumn, they'd earned enough to buy out 3 failing ranches, which they then leased back to the original owners at affordable rates. They'd become, without quite meaning to, the most prosperous and influential couple in the territory. But success brought new problems. Men who'd once dismissed Maverick now sought his partnership, while women who'd snubbed Cordelia now competed for her friendship. The attention was uncomfortable for both of them. One evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, Cordelia voiced what they were both thinking. "Do you ever miss it? When it was just us against the world?" Maverick considered this. "Sometimes, but then I think about the Johnson family. In their new house, and Henrik's grandson starting that apprenticeship we funded, and Martha Chen's boarding house thriving because we helped her expand it. We did good, didn't we? We did extraordinary, Cordelia. Just like you." She leaned against him, carefully adjusting her position so her weight wouldn't overwhelm him. It was a dance they'd perfected over the months, the gentle choreography of a love that had learned to accommodate their physical differences. "I got a letter today," she said quietly, "from a woman in California. Her husband died, left her with 4 children and a failing farm. She heard about us and wondered, ... if we could help. If I could come work for her. She says she's got enough money to pay well, but she needs someone who can do the work of 10 men. Maverick was quiet for a long moment. "When would you leave?" "You mean when would we leave, don't you?" He smiled. "Of course. Think I'd let you have all the adventures without me." 3 months later, they stood on a hillside in California, watching Cordelia raise the frame of a new barn in a single afternoon. The widow, Alina Vasquez, wept with relief as her children ran around the construction site, shouting with excitement. "This is what we were meant to do, isn't it?" Maverick said. "Not just ranch, but help people build their dreams." Cordelia nodded, her eyes shining. "I used to think I was too big for the world. Turns out the world just needed someone my size to help hold it up." As the sun set over the California hills, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Maverick reflected on the strange turns life could take. He'd ordered a mail-order bride expecting a delicate companion. Instead, he'd found a partner who could literally move mountains. It was, he thought as Cordelia's laughter rang out across the valley, the best mistake he'd ever made.